Welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when new videos are available. I really hope you enjoy this one.
Okay, so what I want to do today, instead of like just spending time breaking down both sides, countering what we need to do, I just want to, again, we did this about 9 months ago. We're gonna write an offer. We're just gonna go through this offer step by step and write it. And I'm gonna just give you some advice and how I think that we can improve our skills of writing offers and write the strongest offer possible. Because unfortunately today, for the majority of us, our offers are really our only opportunity to present our buyer's best foot, right? We don't have conversations. We don't have conversations with the listing agent the way we should. And sometimes the listing agents don't make themselves available as they should. So all we get to do is exchange emails and then just submit this offer in a vacuum. And if that's the only impression that we get to make of ourselves and of our clients, then it's important that it is the absolute best impression, right? So the fewer mistakes, the cleaner the offer looks, the stronger the way the offer is written, the better. Okay. And I think what happens is the more that you guys practice with the idea of having to write an offer, like actually doing it. I'm not a proponent of templates. Like I know people have templates, they save templates, they do all that stuff. I'm not a proponent of it. Number one, templates don't update when the forms update. You have to go and manually update them. And more often than not, I see a lot of mistakes with templates where an offer gets submitted and there was something in the template that was specific to a previous offer and we miss it as we're updating the offer for the new buyer or whatever it is, and we leave in terms that have no bearing on the transaction that we're submitting the offer for, and it makes our offer look weaker because it makes the listing agent, who our only impression of us and the buyer is that offer they get to see. Okay, so it affects that. So the stronger you guys get, the better foot forward you put as you're submitting these offers for buyers. And right now, with the level of competition, with the lack of inventory, it's important that we're doing things the proper way. It's amazing to me the amount of offers I see from very experienced agents that are poorly written, improperly written, things in the wrong spaces, blanks where there should be check marks or information written, those kind of things. So really, it's not just because you're in the business for a long time, you become good. It's a skill that you have to practice and you have to work on and you have to improve and you have to want to be good at it. And that's unfortunate to me. There's a lot of people that I run across, have been doing this for a really long time, and you would assume would want to be the most professional, and their skill of writing an offer is weak, to say the least. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. All right, here we go. Let's share that. And you guys should be looking at the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships. Now, this is my opportunity, as I enjoy to do, to talk about this form, which we disregard rather easily. So again, I know we're going to talk about writing an offer, but briefly, I want to talk about this. So the disclosure regarding agency relationships is not a binding contract between buyer and agent. It is exactly what it says it is, a disclosure regarding the ways you can have a relationship with an agent. And that's it. Anybody that I do any kind of real estate business with, right? A tenant, a landlord, a seller that I'm preparing to take their listing, or a buyer that I may be showing property. I am to have one of these signed first before I do any real estate activities with them, so that I can show proof that they were explained how they can be represented by an agent. And those ways are, as a seller's agent, if I'm speaking to a listing, and I take your listing, I am the seller's agent. If I'm working with a buyer and I start to prepare offers for you, I am the buyer's agent. If I happen to write an offer on a listing from my brokerage or one of my own, then I would be an agent representing both seller and buyer. That's dual agency. And in dual agency, I have to get your permission to act as a dual agent. And that happens on another form, the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. So I have to get this signed. I don't have to do one every time I write an offer, right? I know that it comes out with the offer, right? I know it does. So if I'm working with a buyer, I have them write an offer the first time, this comes out. The next time I have them write a different offer, this comes out again. I don't have to continue to have this signed and updated with every offer. As long as my disclosure regarding agency relationships is dated prior to the listing and prior to an offer, I can use that, for the next year, as long as I'm working with those clients. Okay. So what's probably going to happen, as earlier before we started, Darwin had asked me about the changes in our practice that are coming, whether they're coming in July or August or whenever they're going to come, when they're finally approved and NAR changes that, and all of our associations follow, CAR and everyone else. You're going to have buyer consultations prior to showing buyer's property, which I know most of you guys as professional agents do that, but not 100% of the agents do any kind of buyer consultation. A buyer calls them, says, "I see this house, I want to see it." They go, they take it, they show them. Most of the time, or some of the time, they show them prior to getting them qualified, all those things. You don't even have this agency disclosure signed and you're showing them property, and that's not the way it should be. Okay, so when these changes go into effect and we have to have these consultations prior to showing property or discussing real estate with them or getting them to sign a contract to work with us and pay us compensation, that's going to be required for us to even show them property. You're going to have one of these that may be dated 2, 3, 4 months before you get an offer accepted with them. And as long as you have this one, you don't have to continue to do it with every offer. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear for everyone, that once you have one, as long as it's dated prior to any offers or listing agreements that you sign, you're good. Okay, any questions about the disclosure regarding agency relationships? Again, this doesn't bind them to work with you by you signing this. It's just proof that you were able to describe to them the possible representation inside a real estate transaction. That's it. And you have to have one. This is not CAR that requires, this is not NAR, this is the Department of Real Estate that requires this. Okay, so you have to have it. Let's move on. This is the Fair Housing Discrimination Advisory. We're not going to go, we've done that as we've done the RPA class, but again, like I said, I like to take every opportunity possible about that agency disclosure. The possible representation, again, this is where we're explaining to them how offers work, how the market itself works, and this is where we get their permission to act as a dual agent. Okay, that's what this form is for. The wire fraud, again, just make sure that when you're having a discussion with any of your clients, sellers, buyers, anybody, that they talk to you prior to wiring any funds to escrow, no matter what the email looks like. If they get wiring instructions in an email, then they need to talk to you before they go and wire anything. And you as agent need to verify those wiring instructions with the escrow company you're working with. Don't just take the email on face value, because we know that there are a lot of shady people out there that are ripping people off for a lot of money with these wire transfer scams, okay? So just remember that. All right, now the buyer homeowners insurance advisory comes in, explaining to them about the importance of getting the home insurance and, again, the difficulty at this point and the cost of getting homeowners insurance in the state of California. All right, so let's get right into writing the offer. That's what we were here for, right? Okay, so first things first, date prepared. That's today. We're writing this offer today. Whether I'm meeting with my buyer tomorrow or Saturday, it doesn't matter. I prepared this offer today. Okay, the date that it was prepared affects nothing as far as timelines go. Okay, so whenever you're writing this, like I could have said, wait, we have an appointment scheduled for today. It's going to get postponed until tomorrow or Saturday. I don't need to change this date prepared offer date. I can, but you're not required to. Just remember that that date prepared is always going to be referenced in other documentation throughout the transaction. Okay? So date prepared is today. Here we go. This is an offer from. Pretty straightforward. This is the buyer's names, right? The buyer's names, it has to be their legal name. I would, just to make sure, would check everybody's ID, right? And say, hey, I need the name on the offer to match what's on your ID. For two reasons. This is a legal document. We downplay it by calling it the offer, right? Instead of a purchase agreement or a contract or whatever we want to call it. We call it an offer. Makes it sound a little bit less important, but it's a legal binding document. You want to make sure that legally we have the right names on there. Number two is the lender's going to want that to match however they're applying for the loan. And if it doesn't, we're going to have to make changes to the purchase agreement later. And that just adds more paperwork and signatures on
And the buyers. Okay. Hold on one second. I just want to make sure that okay. Where was I? I got sidetracked because I thought that my microphone turned off. Okay. So names, legal names, that even goes for entities that want to purchase, right? Because you could have an LLC, a corporation, a partnership that want to purchase. That's fine. It just needs to be that legal name. Now, the other thing, and this is a conversation I have almost daily, you have multiple buyers, right? You have multiple buyers. So we know, and I'm going to skip way down here to the end of the contract and go back. So don't look at the screen right now. You're going to get dizzy. But if we look at the final page here for the buyers' signatures, there's only a spot for 2 signatures. That's it. Okay. But, and again, sorry if this makes anybody dizzy. Let me get back to the offer. Sorry. There we go. But if I click in here, I have space for 4 buyers' names. Okay? I have space for 4 buyers' names. So if I have 3 or 4 buyers, not an issue. I can put all of those buyers' names in. Now, what will happen is those buyers' names, only the first 2 will sign on the actual RPA. The other 2 will sign on a form called the additional signature addendum, okay? And on that additional signature addendum will only be the names of the 2 additional buyers that were unable to sign on the purchase agreement. And I will show you that when we get to the signature section of the RPA, okay? For us to be able to do that, whether that's today or next Thursday, let's create, 4 buyers. So we have John Smith, right? We have Jane Smith. We have Joe Smith and Jessica Smith, right? Whatever. Those are our 4 buyers, right? So we put that in. It's going to have all their names. But for the signature, it's going to be Joe and Jessica or John and Jane first, right? Whoever the first 2 names were, those are going to be the signatures. And we can look at that. Again, sorry if I'm making you dizzy. But you can see John and Jane Smith, they're set for signatures because they're the first 2 buyers on the contract. The other 2 will be on the additional signature addendum, okay? Sarah, you had a question. Go ahead.
Hi, Kyle. Good morning. Forgive me. So that's happening to me right now. I have 4 buyers. So I have the husband and wife on the contract, and on the additional page, I added the sister and the brother-in-law.
Okay, but did you put all 4 as buyers on the purchase agreement?
Yes, but on the
Like
signature
this.
part,
How this is? It says all 4 names on the buyer line, like we're looking at right now.
for the signature, it only has the additional 2 that didn't fit.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's okay.
The additional signature addendum is only going to have the 2 names that weren't on the RPA.
Right.
That's
Okay.
it.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
As
you.
as a matter of fact, look, since we're talking about it, let's just add it right now so that we can see it. Additional signature. It's already there. Let's hold on. Let me do it this way. Sorry. Why is it not coming up? Oh, here we go. Additional signature. Sorry, guys. I apologize. Let's do it this way. Okay. So now the additional signature addendum is in. We could look at it. Now, the names that are going to go on here are going to be Joe Smith and Jessica, right? Those were our two names. I can't remember. I have a terrible memory. But
Yes.
that's it.
Party
That's
3 and 4.
That's it. Those are the two names, right? Those two names are the only ones that are going to go on there. And then they're going to put their names here. It'll be Joe, right, as buyer. You don't need to put buy or title because this is not an entity. If this were an entity, we would, and we're not going to get that detailed into it right now. But that's him. And then he's going to sign his name. He's going to initial here. And then this one is going to be Jessica. Okay. And that's it. They're buyers.
Perfect.
That's how it looks. You don't need to put all 4 of the buyers on here, just the 2. And then this is part of the purchase agreement. And the date was today's date, right? Because we did it. And then the property address and everything will carry over from here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kyle.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, it's good that we go through it because I don't think that, we have these discussions about how it works, but I think this is maybe one of the first times I might have shown you guys how to actually write it. Do you need to click additional signature to make it part of the offer? Yeah, you have to include it. Okay, so let's get back to the offer. So now we've got all 4 of our buyers' names. Again, make sure it's the complete names, the actual legal names, and whether or not that is an entity or corporation, any kind of entity. Make sure it's the proper name, and then we'll account for that as we get to the entity sellers and buyers. Jesus, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Kyle.
Yes.
However, on the additional signature addendum, ASA, that has to be included for every addendum or change that needs to be done in the contract, correct?
Yes, and no. You don't just do one for everything. You have to do one for specific things. And again, we could go back and you can see. But here's what I will tell you. Just because it is, you see here where it has purchase agreement, listing agreement, or other. If it's something like an amendment, an addendum, something like that, then maybe you would do additional signatures, addendums for them. I think on disclosures and things like that, especially for doing electronic signatures, if you just want to add the additional signature lines to those documents, that's okay because there's still an acknowledgement. It's just because with the purchase agreement, not only are they signing, but they're initialing here to agree to liquidated damages and dispute resolution also. So it's really more important for listing agreements and purchase agreements to have this than it is for things like disclosures, amendments, and addendums, because throughout the transaction, especially using digital signatures, I can add additional signatures even though it doesn't call for them, and it still shows proof that those things were acknowledged by those additional purchasers.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let me go back to the purchase agreement again. I know I have to scroll down quickly, so again, I apologize for anybody with motion sickness. Here we go. All right. So we've got the buyer's names. Now, in addition to the actual names, you could have something like et al, E-T-A-L, right? Like, for example, if we didn't want to have, if we didn't have Jessica or Joe, right? We only had John and Jane, but they were thinking about maybe they were to include a co-signer, they just weren't sure who, you could add something like et al. To it. Et al. Means, hey, it's John Smith, Jane Smith, and anybody else that we may want to add. Or you could add something like, let's do it with one name because it comes out weird. Sorry. You could do and or assignee, right? And what that does is it says John Smith and or assignee. So what that means is that I am John Smith, but I am requesting for you to give me the option to add somebody to the purchase agreement or assign the purchase to somebody else completely. And that's what that says. Now, the contract gives you 17 days to request an assignment from the seller. Now, remember, the seller has to approve any assignments. But if I write an offer like this, where I know that in the future I may want to assign it wholly, or I want to add another buyer, and I put it like this, and it is not countered from the seller, then they're giving me permission to assign the property. I just have to do that assignment within the time specified in the contract. Okay, so these are the ways. All the names, the legal name of the entity, or the name of the buyer and or assignee. That's going to be your most common things you're going to see there. So for today, let's just go back to, it's just John Smith purchasing the property. Property to be acquired is an address. We're just going to use the office address for now because it's just easier to do that. 95 Telegraph, and it should be right there. Boom, there it is, 9155 Telegraph Road. And that's located in the city of Pico Rivera, right? We already have that saved, so that's there. That is the county of Los Angeles. And the zip code here is 90660. Make sure that you have the correct address. It's amazing to me the amount of offers that I see that people don't have the proper address. And it happens a lot, especially when you're showing multiple homes to a buyer, is that sometimes things get confused. You reverse some numbers, you misspell a name. Check your spelling. That would be my first piece of advice, is make sure that you're spelling things properly. Make sure that you're capitalizing things. Your grammar looks well in these, looks good in these offers. So the address, the city, the county, the zip code. Now, I am not one that says you have to put parcel numbers in. The only time I would absolutely say that you have to include parcel numbers is if there's multiple parcel numbers that are associated with this address and you want to be clear. But if there is a street address and you don't want to put the parcel number in, you don't have to. But if you're going to put the parcel number in, make sure that it's the exact parcel number, that you're corrected. So we do so many things as agents in a hurry, right? Because we want, I got to get this offer written, I got to get it in. They said I only got this much time, and we don't take the time to go back over our work, to proofread. I get there's about 3 or 4 agents that work with us here that'll come and bring me stuff to proofread, right? Their flyers and things, letters and stuff they're going to write. I think that's great. If you could take the time, if you have the ability to have another set of eyes look at something before you send it out, it's always a good idea. I know we don't always have that. So just take your time, look through, make sure everything is written properly. You've got the right address. You've spelled things properly, because again, that also has an effect on the strength of your offer. Think about it. If you send an offer to somebody and they read it, you misspelled Pico Rivera, right? Like I did when I was typing, and I didn't go back to finish it because I was in such a hurry to submit it. Don't you think that leaves some kind of impression on the listing agent when they see offers that are like that? And again, I know that it's really expensive to be a board member, right? To be a member of CAR, to have access to these forms. I know it's expensive. That don't join, that don't have access to these forms, but they get copies of them. You have to, and they have to sometimes handwrite these offers. Or sometimes you guys are out in the field and you handwrite offers instead of having some way to access the offers electronically and write them cleanly.
that also has an effect on the impression that you leave with the listing agent. And for those of you guys that are on this video, on the class right now or watching this video later, you be honest with yourselves as listing agents. If you get a handwritten offer, you know that there is a certain type of way you feel about that offer and about that agent. And it makes you question whether you want to spend the next 25, 35, or 45 days working with them in trying to get this transaction completed. And so it's just stuff that we have to think about and that we're doing things properly, okay? But parcel number, if you want to put it in, go for it. If there's multiple parcels, make sure you have all the parcel numbers in there and double check them. Make sure that you have the correct numbers, that you haven't transposed any numbers, that you didn't put the wrong number, because that also leads to something that needs to be countered. What we're trying to do, now we can't erase counters completely, but what we're trying to do is reduce the amount of clerical counters, right? Like I got to counter you to fix the address. I got to counter you to fix the names. I got to counter you for, the parcel number. Those are clerical things. You want, transactional, negotiable things that are in the counter. That makes sense. But if I have to counter you to clean up the way you wrote something, it's not going to go good for you as the buyer's agent. Okay, next, confirmation. So in the agency disclosure, the disclosure regarding agency relationships, we talked about here's the ways that you can be represented by an agent. Here is where we're confirming that relationship, right? So the seller's brokerage firm, if I'm writing this offer and it's not one of our company's listings, it's some other company's, I'm going to put the firm name and it's, Banana Realty or whatever it is, or it's a Jones Realty, right? We'll do that, Jones Realty. That's them. Okay, so we got Jones Realty. I don't know what their license number is, 0143723, right? Whatever. Let's just say that's their number. And they are the listing brokerage firm for the sellers. Oh, I use the MLS Connect button. It uploads the info from the, yeah, that's true. Yes, you can save time to do that MLS Connect, but sometimes you're writing, whatever you want to do. But yes, the MLS Connect button will bring all that stuff in and it does make it easier for you. But you would be amazed at the amount of offers I see that don't have these license numbers added to the contract. The seller's agent. So let's say the seller's agent is Ben Jones, right? So his number is 0124567, whatever, okay? Now, the buyer's brokerage, that's us. It's here because that's where I work, right? So I put Century 21 All-Stars, our license number 01280965. So for those of you guys that don't know it, that are on the class right now, take a note. That's our license number that you need for the office. And it's me writing the offer. So I'm going to put my name in there and my license number 014577006. That's me. Okay. Make sure that's in there. Now I'm confirming based on that agency disclosure that I spoke about with my buyer that said these are the ways you can be represented. Now I am confirming Jones Realty and Ben Jones are representing the seller, and Century 21 All-Stars and Kyle Estrada are representing you, buyer. That's our confirmation, okay? Please make sure these boxes are checked. Again, I got to tell you, it amazes me how many offers I see that these boxes aren't checked and the license numbers aren't in. Now, as a listing agent, if I get an offer like that, I've got to counter it. So I have to write a counter offer now to tell you guys how to put your license number into a purchase agreement. And then there's actually a secondary form that I'm supposed to include that's called a confirmation of agency. So this section of the purchase agreement on another form, you're creating work for me. And what happens is when I look at that as listing agent, if I get that offer that doesn't have the boxes checked, doesn't have the license numbers in, I'm thinking, do I want to spend the next month with this person? Because right in a transaction, you're my partner to get it closed. And if your offer already in paragraph 2 is this bad, I don't even know what I'm going to get to as I get through paragraphs 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. You're right. And again, listing agents that are on here with me or watching this later, in your head, you're all thinking the same thing. I wouldn't even counter it. I'd reject it. And again, that's happening to some of us as buyer's agents. We're not even getting a shot. We're just getting the seller, the buyer's agent, the listing agent is telling the seller, this offer is so terrible, I don't even want to counter it, and it's going to be hard to present. This is what they're offering you, but can you just initial that was presented on this day and this rejection, and then send it back to you, and that's it. You're not even getting a real chance because they're making an opinion based on how you wrote the offer. So I'm telling you, it's important. Okay, now, if for some reason this was like a co-broke thing, right, where it was like co-list or two agents from different brokers that are working with the buyer or seller, then we would check this box, who they were doing, and it would include a form called the additional broker acknowledgement, okay? This potentially competing buyers and sellers, there's a box is automatically checked to incorporate that possible representation of more than one buyer and seller that we already kind of went over. So all of the negotiating is done in paragraph 3, okay? This is the paragraph. Paragraph 3, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, this is paragraph 3. This paragraph right here is the paragraph that gives more detail of this negotiation paragraph. So for example, what I see, and this is just something to bring up for those of you guys that are listing agents or want to be, is I see a lot of time in counter offers where it will say something like paragraph 5, price to be, X, or, paragraph 5A to B, or paragraph 5C doesn't apply. You know what I mean? I see that. This is not the paragraph that we're negotiating. This is paragraph 3 and this letter. Disregard this and any of your references of counters or conversations. It's paragraph 3 and whatever letter you see here on the left-hand side, okay? Any questions before we start writing some more? Anybody have any questions? No? All right. Okay, purchase price, very straightforward. What is the purchase price that you're offering? For example, we're going to offer, let's say, 900,000, or that's 9 million, see? Right? There we go, 900,000. It's not going to be all cash. If I check off all cash, what it automatically does is it removes my loan contingency. If I am getting any kind of financing, even if that is a hard money loan or private financing, I still should leave that all cash unchecked, even though I'm going to write the offer as if it is cash, because those private money and those kind of loans still have conditions. Okay, Darwin, go ahead. You had your hand up first.
Okay, yeah, my question was that the way you explained it has to be paragraph 3 and use those letters. That's it, right? Nothing else. Just
yeah, I mean, if I'm referencing as a listing agent and a counter, and I have to reference the paragraph, I'm going to reference it as, hey, paragraph 3 E1 is this. If I'm using that, right?
Right.
I don't necessarily do that unless as we get farther down where we're talking about things like where is it? Here, like 3Q, 5, and 6. Let's say I'm in a city where that doesn't require any pre-sale inspections and things like that. I'm going to counter back and say paragraph 3Q, 5, and 6 do not apply. Not 10AB2, 10B2, not that. This is just an explanation. So it's always just this. And this is all the way down as you see this as we go until you get to R right here. All of that is paragraph 3.
3.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. And Jesus, you were next. Oh, sorry. There you go.
I actually, you answer the question I had. Thank you, Darwin, for that.
There you go. All right. Perfect. Let's move on. All right. So purchase price, 900,000. This in this case is not cash. So we're not going to check off the all cash. Close of escrow. 30 days after escrow, it drops in there on its own. Now, I see a lot of offers with 21 days after close of escrow. And I'm not saying that those aren't possible. It just seems like to me that the majority of the time when we have those 21-day escrows, we're working on extensions. That's all. And anytime that we have to negotiate extensions, you're looking at causing issues. I would suggest that you just leave it at 30, because if we can close early, we can close early. But at least we have the time of the 30 days if we can't close on that day 21. That's just me. Now, if you get countered back that you got to put 21 days, that's different. Okay, that's different. So I would go with 30 days. The specific date is really for that. Like, it's a specific date. It could be something like, hey, we can't close until this day, like a seller maybe is dictating that. And if you're having the proper conversations, and I probably should have talked about this before we got into the writing, when you guys are working with buyers to help you to increase your chances of getting your offer accepted, you've got to have good communication with the listing agent. Now, that's granted if the listing agent is communicating back. But before I show, I should reach out to the listing agent. After I show, right, and before I show it, I'm going to reach out to the listing agent. And there's some specific questions I want to ask, like, hey, do you have any offers? If they do have any offers, when are they planning on presenting those offers? And then letting them know that I'm showing the property, whether it's that day or the next day. Okay, that's pretty straightforward prior. After I show it, if my buyers are interested and they want to write an offer, then there should be another attempt at communication with the listing agent, and that would be, hey, by the way, my buyers love it. We're planning on writing an offer. I needed to find out if you have gotten any offers since the last time I spoke to you, and if you have, when are you planning on presenting those, to make sure that I can get my offer submitted to you in time, right? And at that time, ask the question. Now, in the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, it mentions in there that offers are not necessarily confidential, which means they're not confidential. Unless there's a written confidentiality agreement between all the parties, there is nothing in this offer that is confidential other than personal information of the buyers and sellers. So, as listing agent, this is just my advice to you. There is no reason when a buyer's agent calls you and says, hey, what's your best offer, that you can't tell them. There is zero reason that you can't tell them. The only reason you don't want to tell them is that you probably have the best offer of your own buyer and you don't want the competition. That's it. That's probably the only reason. Other than that, there's no reason. My job as listing agent, and even if I have my own buyer, my job as a listing agent, first and foremost, is to get the best offer for my seller, not the best offer for me, right? So if I were to get a phone call from anybody watching this video or on this class, and on a listing that I had, and you said, what's the best offer? I promise you I would tell you, even if it were mine. Because as soon as I hung up the phone with you, I could turn around and call my buyer and say, hey, buyer, I know we are submitting an offer at this amount, but I just received an offer from, Aditya, and it's $10,000 more than yours. Do you want to stay at the offer that you made, or would you like to improve your offer to match or better that one? And then it's my buyer's choice. If he says, no, I want to stay, I don't want to go up 10,000. Terrific. I'm still going to present my buyer. I'm still going to explain to the seller what the benefits are of working with my buyer. But if ultimately the seller says, no, I want Aditya's offer with the extra 10,000, then we got my seller what he wanted. But the problem is that we won't negotiate against ourselves as listing agents. And there is nothing wrong with me sharing with another agent what the best offer I have is. The thing is that, especially when we're dealing with multiple offer situations, why do I want a worse offer? Right? There's a couple things that happen. If I say to, you call me and I say, yeah, my best offer is, $850,000. And you were planning on offering $825,000 and you can't go to $850,000, you're probably not going to submit your offer. Or if you can, you're going to submit it at $850,000. But I don't have to present another offer that we're not going to accept. Does that make sense to everybody? So you're kind of helping yourself while you're doing that, and you're doing what's best for your seller. Okay, so let's move on. Sorry. So those are the communications that should happen, because when I ask that question for the expiration of offer, right, the default of the expiration of offer is 3 days after I write the offer. So 3 days after the buyer signs it, this offer expires. I, again, don't want to have to cause another counteroffer for the seller listing agent, because if I submit you an offer and you already told me, right, so today is Thursday, you're not going to present until next Wednesday. right? That's more than 3 days, because if I send you the offer today, Friday's day 1, Saturday is day 2, and Sunday is day 3. That means that any time after Sunday, my offer is no longer valid. It is expired. So technically, as listing agent, I have to, if I'm still going to present your offer on Wednesday of next week, I then have to include in a counter, if you're one of the viable offers, that the offer dated on 5/23 is still valid on the date of whatever that is next week, 5/29 or whatever that is. Does that make sense? You've now given me extra work in my counteroffer. So if I'm communicating with the listing agent and I call because I showed the property and now I call and say, hey, I'm submitting the offer, when are you guys going to present? And the listing agent says to me, well, the seller's out of town. They're not coming back till Tuesday night. So the earliest is going to be Wednesday that we're going to be able to present. So what do? I put, instead of 3 days, I'm going to put on here that my offer doesn't expire until next Friday, the 31st of May. Just to make sure that they have time to present, negotiate, and if I have a chance to get my counter back. Yes, Darwin, you have your hand up. Oh, Darwin, did you? There you
Okay,
go.
but regarding what you were saying about what you call a listing agent regarding what would be the highest, they're so dummy. Most of them are dummy that they don't say, "Oh, it's not fair." I heard that a lot. Oh, it's not fair.
Well, okay, well, but
Which if they
okay,
call me, I
well,
say, "Yes, this is the highest," even if it is my buyer.
okay, well, but first let's start with, let's not call him dummy. I think that what happens is that in like any practice, that's how they were taught. They were taught. You guys have, for those of you that have been with me for a while, you've been taught differently. Now, I don't know that you're practicing that. Darwin, you say you are. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know that everybody's practicing that anyway, but it's one of those things that it just is how the business has been taught to everybody. Like, you learn as a buyer's agent what to be as a listing agent because you learn from how you're treated, right? So every buyer's agent that ultimately became more and more successful in this business and transformed themselves to a listing agent, their entire career, all they got was, what's your best offer? Sorry, I can't tell you that. Just submit your best offer. That's what they got. For 3 years, 10 years, 15 years, that's all they got as buyer's agents. So it's only natural that as a listing agent, I fall back into, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. Now, we just have to start changing the way we think about things, especially as like the professionalism and how we treat our clients and who is first. Is it our pocketbook first, or is it the seller? Is it the buyer's well-being? Are those our first thoughts, or is it, oh shit, I can put these two things together and I'm going to make more commission? If that's the first thought, then maybe we've got to reframe the way. And again, I don't begrudge any of you guys double ending and making deals work and making as much money as possible. Please do it all day long. Just do it the right way. So that's all I would say. But I just think it's not that people are uneducated, or I don't think it's malicious. I'm not going to tell you. I don't want to default to malicious. It's just how we learned, how we were brought up. Some people learn differently in this business. Some people were brought up differently in this business. And that's all it is. Again, I can't force you. I'm not going to twist the arm of the listing agent and go, no, you have to tell me. No, forget it. You got to tell me this is not confidential. That's not going to get me anywhere. Right? Now, if they don't answer that when I say what's the best offer, if they don't want to answer that, I could say, well, this is what we're planning on offering. Am I wasting my time and my client's time to submit that offer for you? And if it's an offer that's not a waste of time for them, they're going to say no. More often than not, they're going to say no. Sometimes they still come back with, I'm sorry, I can't tell you, write your best offer. And then you have to make a decision based on the information that you do have. But a lot of times they'll tell you, yeah, you're wasting your time with that, or no, you're not. Again, so let's not just immediately say, oh, they're bad. Right? No, that's not right. It's just lack of experience, knowledge, right? Things like that. Okay, so now I've talked to the agent. They tell me it's not going to be presented until May 29th. So I give them a couple extra days to be able to negotiate. Now I've taken away where they have to counter me to make sure that my offer is still valid once they start the counter process. Okay. Deposit. I think this, and it still is an issue that I see, especially with the sales prices that we're working with. Now, if I were offering something like 900, a million in those places, we probably start having to see stuff like, a 3% down payment, 3% of the purchase price, because you're getting into those higher amounts. And the thing is that even in places that weren't necessarily high-end communities where the prices are high, the prices are higher now. And so I think you're going to see more and more from listing agents that you're going to need to have a 3% of the purchase price deposit. Now, remember, this is not your down payment, this is a deposit. But at a minimum, if you're not going to do that, I think your deposit has to be $10,000 at a minimum. There is no, I can't believe when I see, now, sometimes you might have an offer that, you might find something that's out in the middle of nowhere, right? And it's, $250,000 for the property. Okay, if you do 5,000 or less than 10,000, I get it. But for the majorities, our average sales price in the market that we're in is nearly $700,000, right? I went through statistics today, and I don't think I think there's 2 cities in our market area that are just slightly below 700,000 for average sales price. So you're talking about the majority of our stuff is 700 plus and getting close to 900 in a couple cities. And you're going to write an offer with on a $850,000 house with a $5,000 deposit? No. This is one of the ways I get to show my best foot forward. I get to present to the seller, hey, this is how strong my buyer is. So when we start looking at numbers here and we're writing offers with that kind of a deposit, that's, come on, $3,000 on 900,000? It doesn't make sense. And it really kind of starts to fall back on us as buyer's agents. And again, this is the lack of consultation for us as buyer's agents, is that we're not having this discussion from the very beginning with our buyers on what their expectation should be and what your expectation of them is and what their expectation of you is and what the expectation of how the transaction is going to look and the things that they're going to need to do. We don't have those conversations because in the consultation, I would tell them your bare minimum for deposit is going to be this. And if you can't do that, then maybe it's not time for you to buy. It's important. The things that we allow the buyers to talk us into because we don't want to, we don't want to disenfranchise them. We don't want to tell them, I'm sorry, you can't buy if you only have this amount of money. And look, I know it's very difficult for first-time home buyers. It's getting very difficult for people that don't have a considerable amount of money. I know that you could still buy with, there's some down payment assistance programs and there's FHA, which is 3.5. But when we're getting to sales prices that are, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 in most of the areas that we do business with, at 3.5% is still not chicken feed. You can see it's still going to be $30,000 if we do 3.5% for a down payment. So people have to have some money. And so in order to do that, you've got to make sure you've got skin in the game that shows a commitment to that listing agent and that seller. And so I would suggest as we start to get to sales prices that are 900,000, $1 million, $1.5 million, that you're not putting anything less than that 3%. If you're below the 900,000, I think 10,000 is probably going to be sufficient, at least to get your offer accepted. I'm not saying that you're not going to get a counter back to make it 3%, because I'm seeing that more and more, that sellers and listing agents are requiring that 3%. Initial deposit amount. Okay. So for this case though, we're going to stick with the 10,000. We'll just leave it at that. And it's just so we have easy math as we get down to the bottom. Okay. Any questions about the initial deposit? Okay. All right. Let's move on. Increased deposit. This is not something that is necessarily going to be used often. I would say that, 9 out of 10, no, I would say 9 out of 10 times you're not going to use it, but it's probably a little bit higher than that. So what increased deposit would be is if, for example, let's say we knew the requirement was a 3% down payment and we didn't have it. And really the only reason that people don't have it is two. One, I am getting all my funds for purchasing the property from selling another house, right? It's contingent on me selling a house. So really I have this amount of funds that are liquid right now, and everything else is going to come out of that close of escrow. So there's a chance that I don't have the money to do that. You could use the increased deposit. Then that gets a little bit trickier because it's still, you're not going to have all those funds until later. Or you're getting it from like a 401k, right? Because if I'm going to borrow all my money for my down payment and stuff from my 401k, in order for me to start that borrowing process for the 401k, I have to have an accepted offer. So if I only have $10,000, let's say, in my bank account right now, and the balance of everything that I'm going to put in is borrowing from my 401k, then the increased deposit might be my only option, because if I know that I wanted to put the 3% down in this case, I'm going to have an offer accepted so I can submit and bring in from my 401k. Now, this says I'm going to, by default, it says I'm going to submit it upon the removal of all my contingencies. I'm going to put it in, and I'm going to include this form called a DID. You see that right there? What that is it's like a receipt for the increase in deposit. So it makes those forms from the funds from the increased deposit subject to the liquidated damages, not just this original 10,000. Okay, that's what that does. So you can leave it by default on removal contingencies, or if you know approximately how long it's going to take to get that money back from your 401k, then you could, put a specific date in here. Let's say it's going to take us, 2 weeks. Let's buy some time. So instead of here, we'll go to here. We'll say by June 13th, I'm going to do that, which is probably, in this case, if we got our offer accepted, is going to be pretty close to the contingency removal anyway. Okay. So we can leave that alone at the contingency removal. Questions? Any questions about increased deposit? Any questions? No? All right. Our loan amount. Here we go. So in this case, let's say for this loan amount, we're going to put 20% down. You know what? Let's do it. Let's say 10%. 10% is going to be our down payment, right? So 10% down of this 900,000. It's a conventional loan, right? It's not FHA. So we have to figure out what the loan amount is. So I've got 3% is already taken up here, and that's goes towards my down payment. So I got to figure out 17% of the sales price. And if I do that, we're going to do 900,000 minus 20% is 180, and I've already got 27. So my loan amount is 720,000, and everything should match up. Oh, that's only 10%. That's not what I want. It's going to be 10%. So I have to, sorry, see, my math was wrong. We were doing 10% down, not 20%. 90, so we got to make this 810,000. See, I made a mistake. And this is the kind of thing that as we're writing and we make mistakes, we got to make sure we're double checking. So now our loan amount is 90% because I'm putting 10% down. So the math is this 63,000 plus this 17 plus this 10 is the 10%, the 90,000, our down payment. Okay. So $10,000 initial deposit, the $17,000 increased deposit that I'm going to do when I remove my contingencies. And this is the rest of the cash that I'll have to bring in at close of escrow to get us to the 900,000. Okay. So by default now my financing is fixed rate loan. If it is an adjustable rate, then you can click that box and add it. Now, this is something that still most agents don't do. But this is our maximum interest rate for the financing that we're getting, the conventional loan that we're getting with the 10% down. Our interest rate, I don't know what the rates are right now. I'm not going to try to figure out quoting rates, whatever. We'll just assume at this point that it is 6% for this loan that we're getting. With the way rates are going, I want to raise my maximum interest rate, whatever it is that I've qualified for, by either 1/4 or 0.5%. to allow for any changes in the rate during our transaction. Now, I know that sometimes listing agents don't understand why we do this. And for listing agents out there, the reason you want this to be there is because if there is nothing here, or for some reason someone hand writes in BPR, best prevailing rate, or leaves it blank, or puts something that's way too little in there, and I don't counter it, I ignore it. If that person, once they get their final approval, if that rate is exceeding this number, there is no number, or you've countered them something like best prevailing rate, you've given them an opportunity to cancel even if they removed all their contingencies. Okay? So, as a buyer's agent, again, we're talking about strength of offer. I know I'm getting a 6. I'm going to put 6.5 in here. If the listing agent knows what that means, they're not going to address it. If they send us something like BPR, obviously we have to accept that this is not something that we're going to fight with the listing agent over, okay? But you need to have some kind of a commitment in the purchase agreement from your buyers, because I don't want you to give your buyers another opportunity to be able to get cold feet and back out of an offer and not put their deposit at risk. Because if their interest rate, when they qualify at the end, when they get their final approval, exceeds the interest rate that's written in that space, they can cancel even if they've already removed their loan contingency. Okay? Okay, so please keep that in mind. Man, this went fast. I didn't realize we were at 11:59 already. So I'm gonna stop right there because we'll talk a little bit about financing more next Thursday. Does anybody have any questions right now? Anybody have any questions? So that hour went by really fast. Yeah, so we're gonna pick this up next Thursday right where I left off, right there. Thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping that as we get through this and you guys are taking notes and, writing your own offers, hey, have an offer next to you, write these notes, have it there so you can use it as a guide as you go through and write offers. And I'm hoping that by the time we get through this and finish it, that you guys are going to feel really confident in your ability and your skill of writing an offer. So thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you guys soon.